All right, it's 4 p.m. So we're going to start. This is the first seminar of this semester. And our guest is Stephanie Poudreau.
See, yes.
She's the Vice President of Science and Research, and that's a partnership at the Canadian Sphagnum Peat Moss Association. And she's also served as Executive Director of the Quebec Peat Moss Producers Association and the Peat and Substrate Class. She has been working with the horticultural peat industry for more than 12 years. She holds a master's degree in plant biology with the Université Laval in Quebec and has extensive knowledge of peatland ecology and restoration. She has worked as a research professional and as the coordinator of the industrial research chair in peatland management with the Peatland Ecology Research Group for over 15 years. And in her current work, she builds and maintains relationships with various stakeholders, such as researchers and government agencies. She contributes to the implementation of many research programs and restoration projects and in the development of best practices for the industry. So thank you all for coming. Let's give her an applause and welcome.
Thank you. I want to introduce Charlene McCartney, also from the CSPMA. She's the Communication and Sustainability Manager. So she might come in my discussion, in our discussion, if we have questions for her. So yes, to summarize this presentation, I'm the link between the industry and the researchers. We're doing a lot of research projects in peatland management. So I will try to explain you how peat is harvested and how peatland are managed in Canada. First of all, before I started, I just want to get a sense. We had a lunch with graduate students and people working here, and we discussed about peat and peatland. So I just want to know how much of you knows about peat. If you can raise your hand, do you use peat usually? Oh, quite many. Do you know peatlands? Have you ever been in a peatlands? Yeah, one, yes, just one, okay. So, and do you have a positive, negative, or neutral perception about peat? Let's say positive perception, negative perception. No, more positive than negative, let's say. So we'll start from there. Okay. So my presentation, if I succeed to change the slides, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about the industry footprint. We'll talk a lot about collaborative research, research outcomes, peat as a growing media constituent, because it's probably the part that interests you more, and future outlooks of our sector in terms of research. Industry footprint, by the way, what you see in the picture, it's a restored peatland. So just to put you in the context what it looks like. And I will start with the basic. Peat is an organic deposit consisting of partially decomposed plants that accumulate at a rate of approximately 0.5 to 1 millimeter a year. So it's accumulating, but it's slowly accumulating. Horticultural peat, it's mostly from sphagnum moss decomposition. Sphagnum moss is a bryophyte that plays an essential ecological role in peatlands and gives peat its unmatched characteristic. That's why you like it in your substrate. This is the peatland distribution worldwide. This map is from UNEP from 2022. You see that it's really boreal, and Canada has a big part of it, as well as the Baltic countries, Finland, Sweden, and a lot in Russia. So if we look at North America, the peatlands are covering 32% of worldwide peatlands. So there's a lot of peatlands in Canada. In terms of industry footprint, the peat extraction industry footprint, we're talking about 36,000 hectares, which is 0.03% of the natural peatland in Canada. So we have 119 million hectares. And we only have used in the past and now, so since the beginning of the industry, only 36,000 hectares. In terms of production, post-production or extraction, post-extraction, 60% are in production. That means that it's being extracted for peat. And in terms of post-production, the 40% remaining, a lot of it, the majority of it has been restored or reclaimed. And there's this little 11% of unrestored that are usually some historical site when the restoration was not necessarily well known yet. So we are working to reduce this footprint to zero, actually. We have an internal policy to commit to remove those historical footprint. If we look a little bit more globally about what are the main disturbance to Canadian peatlands or North American peatlands, you will see from, again, the same report. It's the newest assessment we have in the world that agriculture is one of the main disturbance type because a lot of peatland has been drained and converted to agriculture. So sometimes we don't know that, but organic soil were usually peatland in the past. There's also a lot of development. Mining industry is affecting peatland for sure. Hydrological reservoir too, because when it's flooded, often it's a country of peatlands, so you flood peatlands. And our sector is really at the bottom of it. So if we look at this in a different perspective, it's 1.4% of all disturbance in Canada. Now, peat extraction itself. So what you need to extract peat, first you need a peatlands. Before having access to a peatland, you need to explore, to take samples, you need to apply for a license, environmental assessment. So it's a very long process. Once you have the lease to have access to a peatland, you need to drain it. It's a wetland. A peatland is wet, it's waterlogged, so you need to install ditches, and then you remove the surface vegetation. This vegetation, ideally, you keep it to restore peatlands after. I will come back to that. You level the land, and you need to prepare the surface with an arrow to dry it with the sun and the wind. And then there's a big peat harvester that will come and harvest just the top of it. So a few millimeters by each time the tractor is going on the field. And at the end, it's transport to the plants and processing and mixing plant. As I said, there's a strong regulation. That's not something you don't have access to a peatland easily. It takes 5 to 7 years before you can open a peatland and start the production. So there's a lot of water biodiversity assessment and a lot of environmental things that you need to prove. This is more in picture to give you more the sense of what it looks like. The arrow, you have the draining ditches. The harvester, it's like that. And sometimes you will have 2, 3, 4 heads, and it's really vacuum harvesting the top layer. Then it's a pile in stockpile. There's quality control in the field as well as in the plant where it is processes. The granulometry is checked. So different granulometry, different decomposition rate will go in different products. And they will mix it with different ingredient, perlite, vermiculite, or whatever the ingredients are in it. And they will add lime often because it's very acidic. And they will add nutrients as well. And then it's shipped for the customers. Now, in terms of collaborative research, that's been since 1992 that the industry has been collaborating with researchers from different universities across Canada. And so we estimate over 20 million of Canadian dollars has been invested in research since 1992 through partnership funding, where industry has been contributing to 66%. So in the program we are working with, it's Federal Agency of Research. $1 of private money is matched with $1 of federal money or more. So it's really a program that helps to work together between industry and researchers. So in Canada, we have the National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada. It's the principal body that will fund the research in universities. We have been working with many universities, but Laval University was the main one, the leading one. But University of Waterloo, University of Alberta, it's various universities across Canada. I will not go into the details of this, but it's just to give you an idea of all the programs that we were partnering with. It's always the same structure, $1 private money, $1 or more of federal money. And at the moment, At the moment, we have started not so long ago the new program called a Partnership Research Chair in Ecosystem Restoration that is mixed with another type of program that is called Nature-Based Solution Restoration of Peatland for Biodiversity Recovery and Climate Change Mitigation. And with that program, we're thinking about the future because the main researchers, Lynn Rochefort, will retire soon. So the Partnership Research Chair is opening a position at Laval University, so a new researcher could be hired. So we know that we will be able to continue for a longer time with the research group. And the goal is really to advance. It's larger than just us. It's really to advance through research and the training of highly qualified personnel, the science, practice, and policy of ecological restoration to sustain biodiversity, improve resilience in a changing climate, and reestablishing an ecologically sound relationship between nature and culture, and to transfer this knowledge to stakeholders, communities. You have here a few of the people that we are working with at the moment. So it's various expertise, plant ecology, greenhouse gas, hydrology, plant ecology, hydrology, greenhouse gas, soil carbon, and soil carbon too. So it's really the main topic that are of interest when we talk about peatlands. It's really biodiversity, climate, and hydrology, the main topic. So we started at the beginning to look at the mosses, the sphagnum moss, that is this little tiny moss that has so many characteristics that is important in horticulture. But as a plant, it's a power plant because any fragments can regenerate. Just here, it's in a petri dishes. It was a 5-centimeter fragments. So from the 5-centimeter fragments, we could grow, I don't know, maybe 10 other sphagnums. So it's really a species that can regenerate very easily. And that's the secret for the restoration later on. So we start from very small trials to, at the beginning, we were thinking maybe we could spread the sphagnum by spores. It's really more vegetative reproduction that is better with this species. So it's better to spread fragments rather than spores. And so we experiment that in the lab, in the greenhouse, and then in the field. And then we apply that to larger area with machinery. So does the sphagnum moss survive the machinery process of manure spreader? And we ended up doing very large-scale restoration trials. And now we're looking at fine-tuning different aspects, for example, ecological connectivity with the surrounding landscape. So it started very small, and now it's bigger and bigger. In terms of outcomes, so the major outcomes is that we have developed a method that is nowadays internationally renowned and applied elsewhere that we call the moss layer transfer techniques. And of course, you need a planning because you need to see if the site that you want to restore has the good characteristic for this method, because you need a peat deposit that is still thick. Maybe I should say that when we harvest the peat, we're not going down the deposit. There's always peat remaining. So let's say 50 centimeters to 1 meter or more. So this peat needs to be still acidic. And we need a donor material from a donor site, which will be usually beside the extracted area. And it's a specifically designed site. And then we will prepare the surface because we want to refresh it and to make it level as possible so that the water will be spreading homogeneously. We're spreading the donor material by really agricultural machinery. So it's a manure spreader. We just spread the diaspores, the fragments, all the plant spores, and etc. We add a mulch just to keep it wet or moist a little bit. And the slight phosphorus fertilization to just help the plant establish quicker. Of course, we will block the ditches because it's an important characteristic of the peatland. We do that at the last steps so that we can work with machineries. And then there's a monitoring program that will start and will follow the recovery of the sites for many years. So our goal is really important to understand that we're restoring to put back the ecological function of the peatlands. So that it's biodiversity, it's hydrology, and it's our carbon sequestration function. So the capacity to accumulate peat again. But our goal is not to go back extract peat because it will take too long. It's more a matter of removing our footprint from the landscape. You have some picture 5 years post-restoration. That's a picture plan, Saraceni, carnivorous plants. So you can see that it's coming back very easily. So we have not planted that. It has seed by itself from the diaspores. You see also what it looks like. We install permanent plots in each of the restored sites to follow the succession and the plant biodiversity. And here we also take a biomass sample. So this is what has been accumulating since the beginning of the restoration. It's one of the experimental sites that we have in Eastern Canada. I don't know if this will work, but this is to give you a view of what a restored peatland looks like. All the red is the sphagnum mosses. There's a lot of sedge. And it's really wet again. Now you know what the peatland looks like. To go back to the long-term monitoring, that's something that we're really proud of because, it's pretty rare in research to be able to monitor something on a long term because often your funding would be 5 years, 6 years, and often not more. So having a consistent funding for the researchers has been valuable for them to install permanent plots and follow them each year. So each year there's a team going all across Canada and monitoring the permanent plots. And so it's a unique long-term data set that informs for global science. And recently it has been used in a meta-analysis with European researchers to confirm the different methodologies and see what is the best with a bigger analysis. And without going too much into the details, the studies show, if you look at the darker green light, that is the distinction between introducing the mosses with or without introducing the mosses, really the acceleration of the recovery of the peatland with the method. So because European at the beginning were thinking maybe we're just too in a rush to introduce the plant. Maybe you could just re-wet and it will recover by itself. But from a carbon perspective, it's really important to put back the plant that are accumulating the carbon. 1 year of a peatland that is non-restore is emitting 7 years. Like if you restore right away, you're saving 7 years of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really important to do it as fast as possible. And maybe I will go here to the carbon balance of restored peatland. Before explaining the graph, just want to do a 101 greenhouse gas lesson on peatland. A natural peatland will sequester CO2, will emit methane. When you drain the peatland, then it will emit CO2. Methane will not be there. When you restore, then it will sequester CO2 again, emit a little of methane. So it's really the balance of everything. The natural peatland is a long-term carbon store, and we want to put it back as a long-term carbon store. And this is an extensive study in one of the sites. So the color line are the measurements after 14, 15, and 16 years post-restoration. The black line and the gray zone are the natural reference ecosystems, so the comparison with the variability. And when it's positive, it's at the beginning of the growing season. It's a little bit, it's still emitting because the plants are not necessarily grown yet in Canada in April. But as the growing season comes, it becomes a very important carbon sink. Even more important than the natural zone because it's kind of a little bit younger peatland, we would say. We're waiting to have more data on more sites, but it's really what we know for sure. It's that after 10 to 15 years, the sites are becoming carbon sink again. There has been a lot of research on carbon, a lot of modeling, a lot of different methodologies are used. It's ether measure in chambers with towers and etc. But here I just want to mention that there has been from a researcher from McGill that has looked to climate change are And we want to know if the restored peatland will stay a carbon sink in the case the climate is increasing by 2 degrees and with lower precipitation. So you have the actual climate and you have the scenario of climate warming. And the NEE, net ecosystem exchange, is what we look at the end of the day. So it's really, it will stay resilient and will stay a carbon sink even though the temperature is increasing and the precipitation are decreasing. So it's resilient to climate change as far as we know. Some other outcome here is, well, I already mentioned it, restoration of the carbon accumulation function within 10 to 15 years. Also, in terms of biodiversity, you know, we're spreading the plants. We're not planting it. It's just spread. But with this method, 20 out of the 24 species are establishing just like that. So it's really, it's a good rate for an ecological restoration method. And the donor sites, actually, I mentioned that we need the material from a donor site. It's just the top centimeters of the sphagnum that we will collect, and 1 meter is spread over 10 to 15 meters of a restored site, so there's a ratio of 1 to 10. And those donor sites are recovering very well within 5 to 10 years. You don't know that it has been used as a donor site because you have to collect just the top of the mosses, and the sphagnum is really good to regenerate. So those donor sites can be used more than once, ideally. So, and there has been a few fires recently, and we were able also to study, to measure the resilience to fire, and the restoration peatland act as a barrier to fire. So that's another positive outcome of the restoration. Again, in terms of greenhouse gas emission, why we are doing all this, it helps update the emissions estimates because emissions factor are used either for the industry to calculate their carbon footprint, but there's also all the national inventory report from all the countries across the world. And what is in there, it's an aggregate of different, the publication that has been published when they did the emission factor. And we really want to make sure that to improve those numbers so that they reflect the reality and the North American reality, not just the global numbers that is not realistic. So working with our researcher has helped us inform the Federal Environmental Agency so that they have updated their own emission factor with the science. Also, that was during the extraction, but during the use and then use, the problem is that because peat was used and is still used for energy in Europe, so they used peat to produce energy. So they burn the peat and they produce energy. So in this case, it's sure that once peat is extracted, it's emitted in the atmosphere because you burn it. But then this 100% decomposition is also applied for horticultural peat, which makes no sense because then you use the peat to grow your plants and then you dispose your used peat somewhere, you make compost or whatever, what you do with it, but it's not disappearing instantaneously. So we are trying to document a little bit more that. So we have done a few studies on the use to better understand the decomposition and the emission of the carbon during the use and use. There is a certification, and we work a lot as an association for developing best practices. So from the science, we want to translate that in best practices. The certification is called the Veriflora Responsibly Managed Peatland Certification. It has been created 10 to 15 years ago. The standard has been updated last year. 80% of the Canadian peat is certified. It's very, there's a lot of work to do. So the smaller peat producer will not be able necessarily to get the certification because they don't have necessarily the human capacity to do it. But the bigger ones and the ones that are exporting to US will most likely be certified. The certification look at different aspects, social, environmental, economic, every aspect, but they will also look at the buffer zone, donor site, operational efficiency, etc. They will make sure that the peat producer is restoring its peatland, and they also need to have a greenhouse gas inventory and reduction plan. And this is where we come with a greenhouse gas calculator to help our producer to meet this requirement. So just to give you an example of also how we use the science in our practices, we had a calculator, and that was the emission factor for the extraction and the restoration. And with the new publication, we were able to accurately reduce the emission factor for the extraction. Doesn't look like a big difference, but it's done by hectare by year. And at the end of the day, it makes a big difference. That's in our in-house calculator. And when we look at the Canada National Inventory Report, it was also translated, the new science was also incorporated in their inventory. And at the end of the day, the distinction is that the emission for our sector, the peat industry, was 1.6 million hectares of million tons of CO2. And before those recalculation, it was 2.2. So it's changed the impact of our sector from a greenhouse gas perspective. Peat as a growing media, it's really peat is the enabler of growing media. I compare that with the flour in a cake. You need, it's kind of the basic ingredient that you want because of its unmatched characteristic, especially for the professional market. So our peat, 30% goes for the retail gardening market, 70% goes to the professional market. Because of the sphagnum that is composing the peat, it's really the water retention is very important, 12 to 20 times its own weight. With the exchange cation capacity, you can also have nutrient retention, a good aeration, it's stable, low phytosanitary risk, and the availability is there compared to other ingredients sometimes. We don't like to necessarily say this is good, this is bad, but we're trying to have a life cycle analyst perspective when we talk about growing media component. And this is from James Atlan in a recent article. And he used a life cycle analysis from 3 different studies where they were comparing peat, cocoa coir, and perlite. And this is the climate change impact. And peat is, say, of course, because of its carbon footprint, it's an impact that we have. But perlite has it too because it needs to be expanded and heated. But it depends of the context where you are, where it comes from, and the process of transformation. But also, it's important to look at other aspects, not just the carbon. Whoops. This is environmental footprint. I don't remember exactly what it includes, but probably the water use and the biodiversity and etc. And then, well, the impact is different. So the message here is that there's positive and negative impact of any constituent that you may use. You need to have a holistic view. It's important to have the best recipe for your use so that you have the best yield for your production. Without using too much water, too much nutrients. So we see that as a balanced way. In terms of future outlooks, we certainly want to continue to collaborate with researchers and all stakeholders. I think that's been our strength, and we want to continue on that line. And Charlene produced this graph recently where we tried to outline the benefits of working with science and industry. So, of course, for industry, it gives us access to research money and resource operational execution, applied science outcome. Particularly, the researchers help us in monitoring the restoration success, for example. It helps us with the certification and compliance. For the scientific side, of course, that builds academic leadership, knowledge development and research tools, scientific expertise and methodology, meta-analysis with long-term data, evidence of climate benefits. And really together, we are co-developing the research question, co-developing the best management practice. Of course, that helps train highly qualified personnel that will come and work for the peat industry or work for government, so more people knows about peatlands. Knowledge transfer is very important, restoration practice improvement, and shared impact. So that's how we see the thing. And we want to maintain our commitment to responsible peatland management and wise use of peat. And in terms of future research, our next step, we will revisit our environmental life cycle assessment for the Canadian horticultural peat, because with all the new research, we can update again what's in there, improve the numbers, improve the perspective. We want to fill the knowledge gap about greenhouse gas emission from the peat during its use and end of life phase. And we want to continue to advise and engage in various external industry research projects. For example, at the moment, maybe I want to highlight the last one. We are sitting at the advisory board of a group called Soilless Substrate Science. It's formed from different researchers from United States and USDA. So there is North Carolina University, Florida University, Georgia University. I don't remember them all, but I invite you to visit their website, soillesssubstrate.org. They will look at all the constituents of growing media in this view of having a general perspective on growing media for the different use, and from their pro and cons of all the component. Because the life cycle assessment, you can look at it from a component point of view, you can look at it from a growing media point of view, but you can also look at it from the plant point of view. So you want to, at the end of the day, a grower will want the best substrate for its plants. So in conclusion, develop, it's kind of, again, going to my more general point of view. The goal is to develop substrate with purpose, considering why, where, and how they are used, while minimizing environmental and socio-economic impacts. And this includes peat. So I'm done. Thank you very much. I hope you learned something. You have any question? Or...
So I know you've been through the process of getting a permit to harvest the peat process. How do you regulate how much people are harvesting to make sure it's not harvested in abundance, or is that something that is on the farm?
Can you repeat the question?
It's how is it regulated to make sure that it's not over extracted, let's say? That's your question? Well, once they have a license, the license comes with a plan, so a production plan. So it will mention the area, and they cannot harvest too much. It's a vacuum harvester. So the vacuum harvester, you cannot say dig in. It's really, you need to dry it, you need dry days, so you're constrained by the weather also. So in Canada, you have more or less 100 days where you can harvest peat. So it's kind of impossible to over-extract an area unless you open it very large. But then the regulators will look, they have to report every year in terms of area of production and in terms of volume, because they're paying fees on the volume extracted as well. So that's how the regulators are looking at it.
Sorry, so
Go.
A lot of the peatlands extracted in Canada are on like crown land, so government-owned land. So in that capacity too, the government does have like much oversight over the process. And as Stephanie mentioned before, yeah, like to even open a bog, there's a lot that they go through. And maybe one thing I don't know if you mentioned, but they have to actually have a restoration plan in place before they start, and they have to pay for it. So in case the company like were to go under or something, the government would be able to use that money to restore it on their behalf, essentially. But yeah, it's a highly regulated.
For people online, no? I will repeat it quickly. So that's a good point, though, that most of the peatlands are crown land. So that's why you need a lease. And they have to pay for the restoration in advance in general. So, and that's important because it's also important to have good criteria for peatland restoration success. But because at some point, the industry wants to release its lease, they want to get it back to the crown, public land. So they need proof of the peatland restoration effectiveness. Crown land for us, it's the public land. We still have a crown. Is that answering your question?
Any other questions?
Yes.
Is there a like educational component for the general public to understanding peatland restoration and extraction?
In the last program from the researcher group, they have an outreach program. And we are trying, like Charlene is with us since 2-3 years now, so we are trying to be better in educating. In my own region, I'm doing field visit. It's more local, but it's important because the people are living around. So we're trying to get there. So, but on my point, on my side, I will do a visit to explain restoration, peatland ecology, the plants, blah, blah, blah. But so we need to do
I was gonna
more.
say, so like I run the communications like plan that we do, and this is part of it, for example, doing this kind of outreach. But we're also kind of looking at a new phase where we're going to work with kind of social media influencers that are in like kind of the gardening space, and that's more like kind of our way to get to the public because we're actually such a small association. We're a staff of 4, so we don't necessarily have the resources to do a huge public campaign. So we have to kind of just be creative in how we're kind of hoping that the information will trickle down. But it's definitely a focus, especially just as peatlands are more kind of in the international climate conversation. So they're on people's radar, and we want to make sure that people know that we're doing it properly in Canada here.
And we invite you to visit peatmoss.com. That's a Charlene baby, but it's very informative with a lot of information that we believe it's easy to understand for the general public. So a lot of information is there.
The effectiveness of the restoration or the efficacy of your efforts. I saw that you were looking at the capacity for carbon sequestration, but are there other parts of the compensation profile that you're looking at saying, yes, we have restored this component here, and are there any parts that you're having difficulty reaching that pre-restoration?
A good question. So the question is, what are the other criteria to assess the restoration success above the greenhouse gas? So there's the plant establishment. The permanent plots are really looking at plant establishment in terms of cover, diversity, accumulation. So that's one thing. The hydrology, there's always hydrological wells to measure the hydrology. The hydrology is taking a little bit more time because natural peatland will have a gradient from decomposed peat to the sphagnum mosses. In a restored peatland, you will have a sharp distinction between the old peat and the new peat, and this has impact on the regulation of the water, but it's a matter of time so that it accumulates and consolidates and became less sharp like that. So it's probably more 30 years for the hydrology. Microbiology is like everything has been more or less studied, but the microbiology it's on the pathway, the good successional pathway, but it takes a little bit more time too because it's linked with the hydrology. The microbes will survive or not depending on the hydrology. And of course, then there is the main thing is the full recovery of the peat thickness. That will take a very long time. But other than that, really we can say that the peat from the satellite imagery, you don't know that it's a restored peatland. You will believe that it's a natural peatland.
Can you talk a little bit more about the export markets that you guys trade, sell your peat moss to? But I see in Europe there is a growing trend of banning, talking about all that.
Yes, and maybe I would start with why there is this trends of banning peat. The countries in Europe have used their peatland extensively, so the resource is less abundant. For example, in Germany, they are banning peat, but they are extracting it in the Baltic countries. So I cannot say they're banning it also for the gardening market and not the professional market yet. So and because they used to burn the peat for energy purpose. So all that's why we're trying to inform the public a little bit more. But 90% of our peat is going to North America, to United States, a little bit in Asia, In the Europe, it will go, say most of the Baltic countries will export to Netherlands or Germany, where the horticulture is very important, you know. China is becoming more and more an important market because of food security issue, like they are starting more and more to produce vegetables in controlled environmental greenhouse. So they need and there is a study at the moment that has been done. It's not yet published, but the demand for growing media is increasing by
400% by 2050. 400% by 2050. But that's all growing media, not just peat.
so all growing media. So at the moment, it's really looking at what would be available in the future. And peat needs to be part of the equation because otherwise growers will not have enough of anything. So yes, compost, yes, wood chips, wood fibers, biochar, cocoa coir, like those are the main constituents, but none of them are perfect. None of them are fully available. So yeah, it's a matter of balancing this.
Is Canada the largest producer of oil?
It's equal to the Baltic states, I would say. The Baltic states are expanding quite a lot. Yeah. But the Baltic states are also, they will have the same climate regulation coming. So the climate regulation are the things that is constraining the expansion of peat production. And it's okay, like it's kind of regulated in a way that it will not expand too much.
So it looked like Russia has them.
Yeah, we don't know what's going on there. We don't know. We don't know. But we know that they probably use it a lot for energy purpose as well, but we don't know for the horticultural market. Maybe they will have a deal with China, who knows? But
Other questions? Any questions from the
The-
online environment?
any question online? They're quiet.
Only 4 participants. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you to you.